I have trouble going to sleep at night. I won't whine and complain about having false insomnia. I just can't go to sleep at night. Some say I have an anxiety problem, others say I just need to take pills, but I've never gone to a doctor about it. Instead, I just get in my truck and drive around for about an hour at night to relax and unwind. Usually it works, and while expensive, I sleep well through the night with no problems. I live in Lubbock, Texas. For those of you who know the area, you know that once you leave Lubbock, it's several miles in either direction before you reach another town. The highways leading out of Lubbock go through miles of flat nothingness before reaching another town, and even then the towns are so small you could throw a stone across the town and it'd be out before it hits the ground. Driving on Highway 84, it's a long way from Lubbock to Littlefield, the nearest large town to the city. It's a nice drive to make when you're alone. Very calm, quiet, and dark. The kind of drive that almost puts you to sleep behind the wheel. On this particular night, it was a typical cold late January night. I had recently started up classes at Texas Tech again and was feeling a bit stressed. So I do what I always do around midnight when I can't sleep. I grab my keys, throw on a coat, grab a small cup of warm coffee, and drive. I took Highway 84 that night as I hadn't driven the road since I had come back from winter break. As I passed Shallowater, that began the long stretch of open road between Shallowater and Anton. I was no more than a fourth of the way to Anton when I heard a tap on my passenger window. I figured it was a rock and ignored it. But then I heard it again and again and again. 3 distinct taps on my passenger window, like someone was trying to get my attention. I turned my head to look out the window. To this day, I wish I hadn't. Staring back at me with dark black irises was a man. His face pale, almost gray, sitting in the dead center of the window, smiling. That smile was the most evil thing I have ever seen. He bore all of his teeth in a wide smile. They were pearly white, and not one of them was out of place. His hair was jet black and short, almost like something out of the 1950s. But that smile, the never-ending grin he bore, has been etched into my mind permanently. I jumped and jerked my truck slightly into the other lane before recovering and straightening out again. I had taken my eye off the window, hoping what I had seen was just a hallucination of some kind. I looked back, and he was still there, just smiling at me like he had been waiting to see me. He raised his hand and started waving at me. I turned my head forward and stared straight ahead. I jerked my truck into the left lane and then swung it back into the right. But I didn't look to see if he was gone. I was too afraid to look. I kept telling myself to keep my eyes on the road and find a place to turn around. Then I see something out of the corner of my eye. I glance over and it's a man running on all fours, naked. My jaw dropped. I looked at my speedometer. 75. I looked back. It's him, smiling at me again. I floored it and raced away from the guy. I heard him jump into the back of my truck. I checked my rearview mirror and there he is, staring back at me through the mirror, still smiling. I'm almost in tears. I just want him to go away. I find a turnaround, slam on the brakes, and check my rearview. He never moved. It was like he had no momentum at all. I didn't even look to make the turn. I just did it and hit the gas as soon as I was on the road again. I can't even be bothered to do the speed limit. As far as I'm concerned, this was an emergency. I returned to Lubbock without the thing in my truck. I know this because as I turned onto my street, he was standing on my front porch, waving to me. When you live in small town Oklahoma, driving at night can make you a little uneasy. In my younger days, the days monsters in my head still lurked under the bed or in my closet, I can remember riding in my mother's car and thank God for her. She was my protector. It was only her, the closed doors, and the rolled-up windows that safeguarded me from whatever my 8-year-old imagination told me dwelled beyond the tree line that met the edge of the road. The car was my safe zone, and any time the doors were opened, we were exposed to danger. 20 years later, I'm in the driver's seat. On most occasions, I don't have a problem driving by myself at night, but something was a bit off a few days ago when I brilliantly decided to run an errand at night. I was on my way to Verdigris Valley Electric Cooperative, or VVEC, to pay my electric bill. I had some fraudulent charges on my bank account, leading to me canceling my debit card and ordering a new one. For the week that I was cardless, my only method of paying the bill was cash. I have a major problem with procrastination, so I pushed it off until 1 in the morning. This meant I would have to use the 24-hour kiosk in Vex vestibule. Oklahoma scenery naturally lends itself to creepiness at nighttime. I was the only car on the road, go figure, and to say my mind began to wander is an understatement. My adult brain's firm grasp on reality decided to loosen its grip and invoke the same thoughts I had 20 years earlier. What could be hiding behind that tree line that approached the road? Was my car still protection enough? Then my ever-so-creative mind expanded my fear's territory. Could something be hiding in my back seat? I shook off the thoughts the best I could and turned up the radio in an attempt to dissuade my paranoia and give me something else to fixate on. After about 5 minutes, I pulled into the VVEC parking lot and drove around and parked in the back of the building where the foyer that housed the payment kiosk was located. For reasons beyond me, my heart began to speed up. Maybe because I knew I would have to step out of the car, out of my safe haven. It didn't help my blood pressure when my phone rang. Metallica's Seek and Destroy is my ringtone, so it was loud, out of nowhere, and made me jump. The caller's number was there on my phone, Vex number. It was odd, but not too odd. Rather than being billed, I deposit money into an account beforehand. Money is taken out on a daily basis per however much electricity I use, and I get an automated call from VVEC when my account drops below $25. The odd part is that they normally call me at 11 o'clock in the morning. They were about 10 hours early this time around. Shrugging it off as a glitch in the system, I made my way to the door. From inside the foyer, I could see the interior of the lobby. Such as any place after hours, it was a completely different environment when empty and masked by shadows. Where there were normally smiling tellers' faces, there now was just blackness. I could partially see down a hallway near the left side of the lobby, but the far end, like everything else, was a complete void. I was needlessly scaring myself by peering inside, so I changed my focus to the payment kiosk and fumbled around a bit to feed it a 20 when my phone rang again. VVC again. This time I swiped left to answer the call and pressed the phone to my ear. I heard a noise that made my already racing heart skip a beat. It slowly shifted back and forth from loud static to what sounded like heavy breathing. Raspy, even, like someone gasping for breath. Adding to a long list of things about the night I couldn't explain, I didn't hang up. I kept listening to that awful raspy gasp, despite the fact that every single hair on the back of my neck was standing tall. For whatever reason, I was paralyzed. The total failure of my motor system forced me to endure that god-awful noise for what must have been the longest minute of my life. The phone was still to my ear when I suddenly heard a door slam shut, and then the call ended. I heard it in both ears. In my left ear, somewhere from the back of the lobby. In my right ear, I heard it on the phone. I grabbed the receipt, stuffed it in my wallet, and spun around as fast as I could. I pushed on the exit handle, looking up long enough to see two reflections in the glass door. One was mine. The other, I don't know, because I was running to my car before it could process. I peeled out of the parking lot and floored the gas, heading back into those dark streets. Out of the frying pan and into the fire, they say. I was doing 70 in a 55. I didn't care. My mind and heart were both racing to the point I thought I was going to have either an aneurysm or a heart attack. I needed some music. That sweet, sweet music that was so effective at redirecting my thoughts. I turned the radio on and tuned to 97.5, the local rock station. Kansas. Carry on. The verse wasn't even finished when the song began to slow down, like a tape player running out of batteries, the tone getting lower and lower until it evolved into static. Then the gasping. The same fucking gasping. No, fuck that. I turned the radio off, but the gasping still remained, though now it was louder and more pronounced, but with less static. That's when I realized it was coming from my back seat. I panicked. I didn't know what else to do, so I slammed on my brakes. As soon as I did, I felt a thud against the back of my seat and the gasping stopped. At this point, I was maybe a quarter of a mile from my house, so I got out of my car and ran. I'm not exactly in the best shape, but the amount of adrenaline my body had produced was more than enough to get me home. I ran inside, locked the door, and turned all my lights on. Exhausted and out of breath, I made my way into the living room and fell backwards onto the couch. I couldn't sleep, though. I just sat there, replaying the nights over and over in my head. That sound burned into my ears, imprinted onto my brain. I knew I would never be able to cleanse it. I gazed at the wall for hours, for so long the sunlight started to shine through my windows. Thank God, it was over. I was finally able to relax under the warm comfort of daylight, not having to worry about anything lurking in shadows. But, of course, only for a brief moment. The lights shut off. So did the air conditioner, my computer, and everything else. The power was out. I pulled out my phone and dialed VVC. You've reached Verdigris Valley. How can I help you? I made a payment last night, I told the operator. And now my power's out. I'm sorry, she responded. Do you have your account number so I can check that for you? Yeah, 1 minute, it's on the receipt. I opened up my wallet, surprised by what was inside. No receipt, and I still had the $20 bill. I was completely at a loss for words. Sir, are you still on the line? Oh. Yeah. Sorry. Ma'am, do you have access to the security footage? No, sir, but I can transfer you to the APM's office if you have any questions. Thanks, that'd be great. I heard the phone click, and a few rings later, someone picked up. Asset protection. Hi. Long story short, I had a bad night last night, and I honestly can't remember whether or not I came in to pay my bill. I heard him chuckle. You should probably stay in next time you go drinking. Let me take a look. He asked me what time to look at, so I told him around 1 and waited while he scanned through his footage. And waited. And waited some more. About 5 minutes passed when I heard him utter a small gasp. Sir, he barely managed to produce the word. His voice was shaking. You need to see this. I told him I'd be there as soon as I could. I hung up the phone and headed out the door, thoughts racing again. What the hell could he have seen? I almost didn't want to know. My mind was a mess at this point, so I took my phone out of my pocket and opened up Pandora to give me something I could listen to while walking back to where I'd left my car. It was nice to walk past the trees in broad daylight, but they still served as a reminder of their dark and twisted nighttime counterparts. To keep my thoughts off of what had happened and what I was afraid of seeing on that footage, I sang along with the currently playing song. Carry on, my wayward son. There'll be peace when you are done. I was driving home late Monday night, coming from a friend's house. It was well past midnight, and although it was a beautiful, clear night with a full moon to light up the road, I still hated driving this late. At last I have to road to myself, I said out loud. I'd driven the road hundreds of times to and from college, but I still got that eerie feeling whenever I was this late. I live in West Virginia, and the road is full of twists and turns over cliffs and through forested areas. During the day it was a beautiful drive, but at night it was a nightmare. Anyway, I was about halfway back to my house when suddenly my car cuts off. Luckily, there was a small mom and pop store close by, and I was able to drift off the road and into its parking lot. I put it in park and let it sit for a minute or two. My car does this sometimes, and most of the time it kicks back to life after a quick rest. However, tonight it did not. I pulled out my cell phone and flipped it open, but it didn't light up, dead battery. I sat in my car and silently cussed it to myself. It was at least a couple of miles to the next house, and I wasn't sure if I would be greeted with understanding or the barrel of a gun in my face when I knocked. Still, I got out and started walking. I hadn't taken 5 steps away from my car when I saw it. Lights. A car up ahead. Yes, I thought as I quickly ran to the side of the road and tried to flag them down. I watched as the car passed me by, my heart sinking as the lights faded behind me. I was just about to start walking when I heard it. First, the horn blasting, followed by tires screeching. This lasted for a few seconds, then silence just long enough for me to comprehend the sounds before the thunderous crash of metal twisting and glass shattering. I ran over to my trunk and grabbed a small emergency kit I keep. I took out the flashlight and ran to where I heard the sound. I shone the light all over the side of the road, which ended over the side of a cliff into woods 30 feet below. I looked for what seemed like hours, but I couldn't see anything. No lights from the car below, no tire tracks leading off the road. I couldn't even see any gravel move to suggest any living creature was anywhere other than me. I decided to try my phone again and call 911. I turned back to my car when I heard him. Someone was crying out below for help. His voice was weak, and I could tell he was in pain. I shone the light back below, but again could still see nothing. I heard him call it again, and I replied, "Hold on, I'm calling 911, help's on the way," I yelled and quickly ran back to my car. I picked up my phone, silently praying that it would work. This time, as I flipped it open, I was blinded by the bright screen. I quickly dialed 911 and explained, through heavy breathing, what had happened, then waited. It took them a little over 10 minutes to get there, and all the while I could faintly hear the man calling back out from over the cliff. I yelled back that I had called help, and it's coming a few times. Suddenly, I couldn't hear him anymore. I turned to go back, to try to keep him going when I saw the flashing lights emerging from the woods. The police and paramedics searched the area for an hour before calling it off. There was no sign of the man calling back, no sign of the car that had gone over the cliff, No sign of any other car but mine and the emergency vehicular, of course. I explained everything that had happened to the cops, but they didn't believe me. I was threatened with being arrested for the prank, but one of the cops said it wasn't worth it and got the others to leave. I spoke with him a while longer and asked why he had not pressed charges. He sighed and started telling me the story. About a year ago, there was a car accident right where we were. However, no one was around to call for help. Apparently, both passengers, a husband and wife, survived the crash, but were badly injured. The husband tried to get help and even crawled back up onto the road before he succumbed to his injuries. The next morning, a car saw his body and pulled over to call 911, but sadly it was too late for both of them. The officer apparently had been called out before with similar circumstances and again found nothing. He told me to go home and try to get some rest, and then he would make sure I didn't get in trouble for the call. I thanked him and got back into my car. This time, the engine fired up as soon as I turned the key, and I quickly backed out and made my way home. But as I drove away, I again heard the man's voice cry out for help, and I cringed as I sped away.